Hello and welcome to Drive the Bid, which is our automotive podcast brought to you by AutoHunter.com, which is our online auction with cars going live every single weekday. And of course, it's driven by ClassicCars.com, its sister site, which is a collector car website with over 30,000 cars currently live on the site. I am Jeff Sutton, and I'm joined by Derek Shiekhi on the left and Diego Rosenberg on my right.
Hello,
and
Jeff.
Today is our obligatory Car Week episode of the podcast, right? So as usual, we'll start with some automotive news. We'll talk about our main topic of Car Week, and of course, we'll close it out with some of the cars that are currently live on AutoHunter.com, right? All right, so with that, let's go ahead and get into the news.
Well, it's hard to believe, but the new Tundra is not so new anymore. It's 2 years old now. For 2024, they've rolled in some updates. So now you can get the Nightshade package that they've offered for years on the limited models. So that comes with things like black 20-inch wheels, trim, grille mirror caps, and badges. Now, this is interesting. You can get a 3-inch TRD lift kit from the factory now. So I can see that being popular. And then as far as that goes, off-roading, the TRD off-road package is available on Platinum 4x4 models. So Toyota bundles things like Bilstein shocks, 18-inch wheels, Falcon Wild Peak all-terrain tires, multi-terrain select, crawl control, and other things. Oh, and you also get a rear locker as part of the package.
Do you know if that 3-inch lift is limited to specific models? Because I believe they have a towing package that has fancy airbags and other stuff in some models.
Oh, okay. So they didn't, I don't remember them making a distinction as far as that goes. It just seemed pretty, broad in general.
Right.
But that would make sense if there was a conflict there.
Yeah. Some of the higher end models, including the Sequoia, get airbags in the rear to lower or raise and automatically adjust for trailers.
Okay, yeah. So I would imagine probably not with those, but all the steel spring stuff seems like, regardless of trim level, that you should be able to add it to them.
Yeah, I forget exactly what the system is. It could even be like an airbag inside of a spring, so it could be like generic suspension with some extra leverage. I don't remember, so maybe you could still do it. Somebody probably knows that answer better than me, but that's cool that it's a 3-inch lift because that means it's a proper lift, not like a leveling kit or something like that from the factory.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds pretty generous. I mean, 1.5-inch lift. I mean, they probably could have gotten away with that, but yeah, 3 inches sounds pretty substantial. And then, the TRD Pro model, the big news for that is a new color, Terra. But unfortunately, the pictures associated with the press release, they didn't really seem to hone in on these specific updates.
It's the least exciting TRD color in years.
I imagine it's like
they ran out of bright oranges and grays and greens and stuff like that and fun blues. So they're like, all right, here you go.
Yeah, I mean, they got to keep the ball rolling. And then, of course, it'll trickle down into the non-TRD Pro models the next year, probably.
Yeah, I think that's what they normally do, right? The TRD Pro color is 1 year and then it's passed on.
Yeah, I think that did that with like Voodoo Blue and the Army Green.
Right. Yeah, they've had a bunch of different colors over the years. Part of me wonders if is anybody going to care in like a collector sense? Is there going to be like you have the first year TRD Pro in this color?
Probably, yeah.
Like auctions in years from now?
Yeah, 15 to 20 years from now, I can imagine so. I mean, because, I look at cool cars, in terms of the design, like 993 911s are just gorgeous cars, but, black on black, like if I was in the market, any of them would be cool just based on the design. But if I was in the market for one, I wouldn't go for one that's, black on black. Or
you'd be looking for a Ruby Star car.
Which one?
Ruby Star.
Ruby Star. I think you mentioned that one before.
Yeah.
There's one. It's I think it's called.
Maybe I forgot yellow.
Maybe I'm blurring the line with Jaguar, but I want to say they have one called like Carnival Red. It's kind of a garnet red.
It's like okay. Older Carnival Red I know is more of an orange.
Okay.
Like a Dukes of Hazzard orange?
No. It's like, I mean, and I could be, anyway, it's a darker, more like ruby kind of red.
Sure.
That they offered back then, and it's it's more
Candy apple-ish.
no, more jewel-like. Yeah, I mean, Guards Red is always
The number one color
Yeah,
on any car, on any Porsche.
Yeah, but the one I'm thinking of, it's darker. But anyway, yeah. So not absolutely major stuff for the 2024 Tundra, but again, it's we're 2 years in, so it's not going to be anything earth shattering in terms of updates.
Yeah, it looks pretty similar for the most part, but neat. Whatever these wheels are right here in this photo, they're sort of roundish wheels. I like those quite a bit.
Yeah, they look good, especially set against the red paint.
Yeah. That's a good looking wheel setup. I've never really been a fan of the capstones. I think the wheels are too big.
What are they,
Sequoia and the
22s?
Tundra. I think they're bigger than that.
Good grief.
Yeah.
As
Now-
you could tell, I'm just not into trucks at all.
Yeah.
Well, you guys both drove the Tundra, right?
Yeah, that was my first time driving a full-size truck at length, and I thought it was pretty cool.
The twin force engines are powerful.
That's the hybrid, right?
Well, they only offer a twin turbo V6.
Yeah. Well, they've got a hybrid too.
Well,
Yeah,
they
that's
have a
what I mean.
hybrid, but they're all twin turbo V6s.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
But the Twin Force is the hybrid, right?
Or are they all called? Called Twin Force? I think they might all be called Twin Force.
Well, here I have it as iForce is the twin turbo V6. iForce Max is the hybrid.
Yeah, that sounds better. So iForce, yeah, I think is their equivalent of like basically saying EcoBoost. How EcoBoost is applied to all of the turbocharged Ford products. I think this is the same thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then-
because we're in that era with them now.
Yeah, we have a review coming out of the Sequoia here soon, which is interesting because the Sequoia only gets the Max engine versus the Tundra can be ordered with the lower end.
Oh, okay.
Standard
Yeah.
iForce.
Well, you probably need it for all that weight.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So did you see this car at Pebble Beach?
Yes, it was not in this color though. It was finished in I want to say blue. They had it in the concept section, which is kind of funny because I guess it's basically on production now. I imagine they'll start coming out before the end of 2023. We'll see them on the road.
So this Mercedes SL, I believe it's a SL63 AMG car, is painted in what they call I mean, I was going to name the color when I don't remember the name of the color, but this is the Big Sur edition. So it was very appropriate for Pebble Beach. Mechanically, there's nothing different than the other SL63s, but with this, you get the paint and fancy interior. They call the interior black in the picture. It almost looks more like a tobacco color. Could be the reflection. It has orange stitching, a few other things.
Quilted patterns on the seats.
I mean, it looks nice, but in the end, it's like Big Sur. I mean, sure, name it after something that's relevant to Monterey Car Week, but the color just, does it invoke Big Sur sunsets to you? I don't know.
Well, it's funny that you say that because, like I said, this color was not the color I saw. They had a blue car on display.
Yeah. See, when I think of Big Sur, I think of either green or blue. I mean, blue, yeah. Blue makes sense. Orange, I mean, yeah, maybe it's a sunset or sunrise thing.
Yeah.
So this is part of the I forgive my German, manufacturer edition, which is kind of like the
With a K in manufacturer.
Yeah, and no E. I mean, if you go back to the interior picture, you can see that inscription in front of the shift. Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty clean, like a cursive font.
Yeah. So that's just their, I don't know what to call it, semi-custom options that they have for as far as like colors and interiors and things like that. So this is just a part of that.
So it makes me wonder, I mean, because I always thought of Diseño as like custom or different colors and materials, but I guess there's another level to it.
Or maybe this replaces it. I have no idea. In fact, when I read this, I was thinking the same thing, not remembering that they had used a different name in the past. So I can't tell you for sure. Otherwise, this is expected to be $200,000, which is
That's where they've
too rich
been
for my blood. But
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
where they've been priced
whatever
for a while.
This is not. I'm not their target market, and that's fine.
Yeah. These cars are certainly expensive, no doubt. I'm trying to think if I saw this or like an AMG GT concept. Have they come out with anything to like replace the GTR?
I know they have I think they introduced a new GT there.
That might have been what I saw instead, because I'm like looking at the headlights and I'm like, yeah, I don't remember it having that sharp of headlights. Because this SL has been around for a year or two now, this generation, right? New, but not brand new. I think the one I saw might have been the concept.
So in that way,
it's GT.
In that way, it's like the Tundra. This is the Mercedes version of the Tundra in that it's 2 years old.
Right.
Something like that.
They're good looking cars. As someone who's owned an SL, I enjoyed that. I'd be curious to like drive this, but then drive an AMG GT or GTR and just kind of see, I guess, if they're that much different from each other, or if they just feel super similar.
Oh, man.
All right. So I figured I would cover this, having seen it in person. This is the 2025, so not coming out soon, Ford Mustang GTD. Ford has self-proclaimed it as a supercar, and it's going to run $300,000 to purchase one. There's not a ton of like information. Basically, Ford was like, yeah, so here's the car. We're planning on building it. Everything was kind of given like here's what we're aiming for. It's going to be a supercharged 5.2 liter V8. They didn't really specify what characteristics. They didn't say Predator or Voodoo or anything like that. It's supposed to be over 800 horsepower. So that would obviously be an improvement over the 760 and the GT500. And it's supposed to run a sub 7-minute Nürburgring time.
I think you mean second.
Sub 7-minute Nürburgring time. It's insanely fast, and it has a ton of new technology in it. So they could have obviously reused a variety of parts. There's tons of high-end suspension components, right, in the existing Ford models, but this also has a semi-active suspension system that's apparently is going to be really easy to set up for track days, and it'll have a track mode that'll drop it by 40 millimeters, making it more aerodynamic, but also increases the top speed by 15 to 20 miles per hour. So it's a full carbon fiber body. And obviously it's been widened significantly. Didn't say exactly by how much, but it's also got an active aero wing that's there mounted on the C-pillars. It's going to have Akrapovic exhaust, who also did the 4GT. It's going to have 20-inch magnesium wheels, carbon fiber drive shaft, 8-speed dual clutch transaxle with near 50-50 weight distribution. So that's kind of the gist of the stats. That's pretty much all they gave us as far as the statistics. So it's going to be an insanely fast car. Lots of technology and variations of which, even though it is a semi-active suspension system, it's not shared with anything currently existent in the Ford line. It's also got unequal length control arms in the front, multi-link in the rear, all sorts of like race car focused bits. So to me, when I see this car, it seems like it would be more akin to a race car than any street car, but this should be street legal by the time it ends up coming out.
I think it has inboard suspension hardware too, right?
I believe so. Yeah, like a cantilever setup of sorts.
I love that wing. I mean,
I can't stand big wings, but this one comes off okay. It's not like a Civic Type R, the last generation, or something like that.
See, I was going to make fun of the wing because for a while there, wings were fairly standard, right? When you saw a wing, they all kind of had a similar fit and finish to them, just different sizes. Then we got swan neck, and everybody was giving swan neck wings to their cars, right? And now I'm wondering if this GTD is going to start a new trend of C-pillar mounted.
I think it will. I think it will.
Like, is everybody going to start putting it on there? Right, exactly. It's like the next best thing. Everyone's like, no, we're past swan necks. Everybody's moving on past swan necks. And we want C-pillar wings now, which I think this could technically be considered a swan neck because it still kind of comes down from the top, but it's a C-pillar mounted swan neck wing with active aero. Everybody's going to have DLS buttons. It'll eventually make it down to the base model Honda Civic EX. It's just going to take a little while.
So here's a question. You said sub 7 minutes.
Yep.
What class is that? Like, what are the cars?
Yeah, so that'll make it faster than a 2017 Dodge Viper ACR. It'll also make it faster than the brand new Porsche Cayman GT4 RS. So best case, obviously you want it to be lower than that. If you want to, there's cars that are a little bit slower, like it'll beat the Porsche 918 around the track, which is a hypercar. Right. So when you think about like what that means to be sub 7 second, that makes it very quick. And it's relatively lightweight. We don't know the exact specs, but being that it's a carbon fiber body, magnesium wheels, we know that the drivetrain itself has been lightened with things like a carbon fiber drive shaft. I imagine the interior will be completely stripped and lightweight as well, probably carbon bucket seats. I imagine it's going to get that full treatment. And if it's, I don't remember exactly how much, if they gave weight ratings for the S650 yet, but if it's anywhere near the previous S550, about 3,700 pounds, I would assume that they can knock down, let's say, 200 to 300 pounds, no problem, off the existing Mustang.
I can presume it has no rear seat.
I would assume so. We don't, yeah, like I said, they don't really have a ton of details. There's not really any engine photos or interior shots. You are limited by what we pretty much have here, but it's very aggressive. Obviously, there's lots of functional aero and ducts that have been added on here. The wide body is insanely wide. My biggest thing is swallowing that $300,000 price tag. Like, we don't know how many of these they're going to build. I can't imagine it's very many. I wouldn't guess. I would say it's got to be less than, maybe 1,000, even less than 2,000, less than 1,000 cars produced. But who's going to buy these? Because Ford's not really famous for producing this type of stuff, right? Like if Porsche came out with something like this, it would sell.
The same people who bought Ford GTs are going to buy this.
You think so?
Why not?
Yeah, I could see that happening because it's going to be a specialty.
The Ford GT is a Ford GT.
Doesn't matter. They're Ford people who like road racing.
Right. And they built actual race cars. They built the FP350, what is it, RS, F, something like that, FP. The non-street legal version of the Mustang. But we'll see, I guess, when they come out with actual numbers. And if they actually go and set a Nürburgring time.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're going to go for it because
I think if it goes sub 7 seconds, it could be an easy sell.
Yeah, well, and
because this would be like a flex then on Porsche people. You go to Cars and Coffee with this thing, and now you're like, oh, those slow.
Also cheaper though, because the Cayman
GT4 RS.
Yeah, that's not a $300,000 car, right?
Well, so let's talk about that. The Cayman GT4 RS, I believe, comes in around 170 MSRP wise. However, go to any dealership that has one for sale, and it's 300,000.
Good grief.
Now, who's to say now will the GTD be able to avoid markups? No, it's going to be, I imagine, 50. Yeah, 50 over at least, maybe even more.
Oh, yeah, I could see it being north of that too.
Yeah. Maybe it'll be like the LFA where there'll be still one brand new at a dealership 3 years after they came on sale.
Well, and I wonder if they're going to do like with the LFA, they did Lexus had the first right of refusal when you bought one. You signed a contract with them. So I wonder if Ford's going to do that with this because they did that with the GT, right?
Yeah, I imagine they would.
Yeah. So, yeah, I can see that happening. Now, one question I have about this is, carbon fiber body, drive shaft. I know magnesium is a lightweight material, but I'm kind of surprised they didn't do full carbon fiber for the wheels. I would imagine that saves some weight relative to magnesium.
Yeah, so this might hurt some feelings. Obviously, Ford has featured carbon fiber wheels before on other models. I believe was it GT500 or GT350 could get carbon fiber wheels.
I know the 500 you could. The GT350, I'm not sure. Probably.
Yeah, so maybe GT500 could get carbon fiber wheels. I think there have been multiple stories of even other brands, not just Ford, that have had issues with carbon fiber wheels. I don't think they're overly durable for track use. So even Porsche, for example, when you choose the lightweight, expensive wheels, so they're magnesium. And so I think that was the thinking here. I think they can get more rigid, durable wheels out of magnesium. And the trust just isn't quite there yet for carbon fiber wheels. That's why I think they appear here and there, but aren't quite like staying. Because I think there's plenty of, I guess. Right. I think there's still there's cracks and stuff that happen in the carbon that just isn't quite there yet.
Yeah, because
they look cool,
but I don't think the fatigue, process is the same because I think carbon fiber, if it gets to a certain point, it just shatters, whereas metal can kind of fatigue over time.
Yeah. Now, if it catches on fire, magnesium's not so great at that.
Yeah. Oh man.
I don't know what the odds of that happening are. I don't know what the stories are about magnesium wheels. Obviously, we used to use them all the time, right? The original mags and I'm forgetting the name of the IndyCar wheel manufacturer from the 60s. Anywho, yeah, you know who I'm talking about. The company that did it.
Them.
Them.
Yeah, those guys. Yeah.
All right. With that, let's go ahead and move on to our main section, which is going to be talking about Monterey. So with that, you guys selected some cars. Dustin and I, our video guy that's off camera, you can give him a shout out in the comments, tell him how much you appreciate his awesome camera work and editing skills. Went to Monterey to film some videos, and we will now be moving on to some of our experiences there and some highlights from Car Week.
All right. So I was not there, unfortunately, but I went through some of the photos that were available online. And, there was such a selection, pre-war, post-war concepts, sports cars, all that kind of stuff. And so many beautiful cars out there. But this one caught my eye because, it's a concept, but also it's one I had never seen before. This is the 1984 Lotus Etna concept. So this was designed by, I took a very quick Italian course.
Good luck.
To get his name. Giorgetto Giugiaro.
Giorgetto Giugiaro. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're close enough.
Yeah, George Jetson. This was designed by him. And this, from what I've read, was supposed to be, originally was going to be a successor to the Esprit. And it was a concept shown at the 1984 British Motor Show. And as a lot of concepts are, this was not initially drivable. This was just like a styling exercise. And I think it was like fiberglass and clay, bunch of different materials just to give the look. And let's see. So it was supposed to have a 4-liter Formula One derived V8, the Type 909, 335 horsepower. Now, about 2 decades later, according to what I was reading, a Dutch Lotus collector bought the concept in 2001 and had it converted to a driving car and based it on an Esprit chassis.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then apparently he had a specialist like restore the car, and as the article kind of didn't make sense, but apparently that specialist was going through the concept and they discovered, it has a gearbox and an engine. And from what I've read, there's only 2 of those Type 909 V8s. So cut to present day in 2022, this and another, I think it was another Lotus concept car, were put up for sale by a Dutch dealership. Mm-hmm. And they were asking about $140,000 once the math was done.
That seems cheap. That had to be losing money on that build to take a clay concept car and turn it into a real car. Surely he lost money on that.
Probably. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Just all the conversion and everything. But then, apparently somebody bought it and took it to the Quail out in the Monterey area. So yeah, it's not surprising that Giugiaro designed this because it's very angular, very, signature lines for him, but just really stood out. Very futuristic even now.
I love that it has the generic door handles. Like the amount of cars that have those. Specifically, I think of all the Triumphs that come to mind as well. I'll have that exact style of door handle. But I don't know why they couldn't get more creative than that. But this also makes me think of the Subaru SVX.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And, there's a part of it that reminds me of the Cadillac Elante as well. But yeah, I was thinking Elante and SVX.
Especially the black roof is very much an SVX thing. Just not as wonky windows.
Well, who did, maybe Giugiaro designed the SVX too.
That I don't know. I'm not great with tracking down who designed what. But the funky font on the steering wheel is kind of funny.
It's, even though it's an 84, the coloring kind of makes me think of the 90s.
Lotus Etna.
Is that retro lettering for the Lotus? I have to admit, not that I'm a Lotus fan, but it looks familiar.
It looks like what the 90s Cool Kid redesign would have done to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Or it almost makes me think of something you would see on like a surf or swimwear brand.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Or a company that makes candles. I don't know.
Yeah, but an interesting car, certainly up the Lotus alley. Worth pointing out. So you mentioned that there were only two. Does that mean they didn't really race with that motor? Surely they would have built more if they were going to take it racing, right?
I mean, that would make sense. But yeah, that's what I read. So maybe it just didn't get off the ground.
It's a shame.
Well, I guess in that way, I mean, obviously the numbers are much lower, but I mean, you look at the Blackwing V8 that Cadillac made for the CT6 Blackwing, you know, that was short-lived.
Yeah. Well, it also cracks me up that it's like they've talked about shoving Formula One engines into street cars forever. And then even like the modern versions, the AMG Concept 1 and stuff like that exist, they're not having an easy go about it. They are struggling to figure out some of the aero features and engine stuff. Like I think I heard somewhere that one of them was delivered, but then was like a week later was taken back to have something fixed or something like that.
Oh, okay. So they've rolled them out, but it's not like, I guess, not the level they wanted to.
Yeah, they're not readily cranking them out. And I think there's still some issues that they're trying to figure out because that car was supposed to have the full DRS system along with that engine. And like the way Formula One engines are built, there's like almost zero tolerances. Everything is built to be very precise, which is why they're able to get so much power out of such a small displacement engine, right? Is they make sure all the seals are, you know, fit and finish. But I don't know how you do that in a way that's maintainable for a street car. Granted, these are whatever, $2 million and up, however much they cost, but they're still trying to do that to this day.
Yeah.
It's a cool rear end.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes me think of, I mean, I said futuristic before, but it's along the lines of like something I wouldn't be surprised seeing in like a RoboCop movie.
Yes. Yeah. It's exactly
the future.
Yeah. But particularly the second one, you know, the Biff dominated universe.
So this is my pick for my favorite car I saw in the media coverage for Monterey Car Week. For you folks in TV land, this was also at the Quail, which costs about $1,200 to get in.
If you can,
yes, because lottery system. So this is I think we may have talked about this Ferrari before episodes ago. This is a car I've seen in car books for the past 40 years. And unfortunately, it appeared at a show and I was not able to go. Finances be damned, but just because I was here. I believe, I know it's a 56. I believe it's called a 410 Super America Superfast 1. So the Super America is a series of Ferraris that was targeted to the American market, but that doesn't mean it's exclusive. The Superfast, I think, has to do with the engine, and there's some evolutionary aspects of the engine with this particular one that I'm not really familiar when it comes to Ferraris, but I've always loved the styling. And one of the things that's interesting about this Ferrari, this is Pininfarina, by the way, is the fins on this, which you don't see too many on the Italian cars, but you do see a few, most notably some of the Ghia ones. But the fins on this is 1956, and the fins are a little bit more prominent than most American cars.
Very prominent. I like that they're separate from like the standard design.
And, you know, the silver contrasting paint is nice. I could think of a bunch of cars that used that in the 60s and 70s. I just think it's a very nicely proportioned car. The roof, the greenhouse is of a nice design. Everything about this, I think, is awesome. It's definitely one of my favorite cars.
Yeah, it's a looker.
That's a V12. Twin spark plugs. It's got 24.
Yikes. As someone who owns a modern Hemi vehicle, I can tell you having double the spark plugs is a pain.
Oh boy. Yeah, I like this detail right here that they just shaped the taillight like the bodywork.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like setting a jewel in there.
Well, I feel like for Italian cars, especially, the Italian design firms always go full extreme, right? And then dial it back for the manufacturer, right? Especially when I think about what is it? The Stratos concept by Bertoni, where the story goes when they drove it over to Lancia, they drove it under the guard gate rail and just drove it straight in there.
Wow.
Which obviously the Stratos streetcar that we got was not quite as extreme and low.
Yeah. Now, one thing that takes away from this are the bumper caps, but other than that, I mean, yeah, it's, speaking of George Jetson, it looks like a spaceship.
It does.
The bumper guards don't bother me because of the spaceship aspect. I mean, if you think of the Dagmars in a lot of American cars, it's just an element. Let's say this is the Italian-esque version of that. I would say if I want to criticize something, it's the side vent. I think it's a little bit too big.
That's because it's an Aston Martin DB5.
It would look a little bit better smaller, but I like that roof line. Let's call it a semi-fastback in a certain sense. It's very nice. It's nice how it like kind of flows down and then it gets cut off by the fins from this point of view.
Yeah, and obviously they've got cool body lines. Everything seems to flow really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you said, Jeff, the way they separate the fins from the rest of the bodywork, instead of having them flow into it, they punch them out. It gives it, even more drama, emphasizes them even more.
Very Italian, full of drama. Can't go wrong with a vintage Ferrari, of which I can confirm there were many of in Monterey and Carmel and the greater surrounding areas, Seaside, Marina. I was very well versed in the multiple cities that exist out there because all the events are kind of scattered around that happen. Okay, so I will get into my long-winded conversation about our experience at Monterey. So,
can I start off by saying this looks horrible?
Yeah, you can say that if you want. The reason I'm starting with this car is this was actually one of the first cars that we saw parked on the street. That is obviously a lot to look at. So first off, let me just start by saying when we went into Monterey, we went in a little late. We got there on Thursday, but there's so many events. It's almost kind of overwhelming. So first of all, every single town, the ratio of normal cars to exciting cars is insane. Like it's in the busy, cool areas with like main streets, it's like all cool cars. But then when you're driving on the highway, it's like every other car is a cool car. And then when you're in the street, some of the different areas have like notable areas where you can find cool cars. Most of them are just street parked. You'll even find just cars sitting in front of, rented Airbnbs and stuff. You'll find like a Ferrari 365 GTB4 sitting out front. Yeah, and you'll just see like there were Enzo street parked, like all sorts of crazy stuff. So one of the first things we saw as we parked our car far away and had to walk over into Carmel and hang out in Ocean Avenue is we saw this. This extreme looking car is one of one. It is an Apollo IE or Intensa Emozione Evo. And so it is the only car built, and it happened to show up to Car Week. It's Ferrari based. It's very extreme looking. The irony is what originally drew us to that area. There's this famous hotel that had two Paganis parked out front, a Huayra BC and a regular Pagani Huayra. And then it had a Bugatti Pure Sport parked in the middle. And so it was like, wow, here is, like $20 million in cars just with these three cars right here. But then you look up a little bit further and there's a black SLR. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. And in front of that is a gated Murcielago. And I was like, wow, there was some heat here. And as Dustin and I are doing our thing, taking some photos, taking some videos, looking at the cars here, all of a sudden, an obnoxiously loud car comes around the corner and it's this thing with its V12 and just parks right up front in front of the other cars. And this tends to steal the attention away of some, monochrome cars and stuff that exist. And this thing is just very extreme in every aspect. And so this was something I would share because this is like quite an introduction, I would say.
Yeah, it looks, I don't know if it looks more like a giant Hot Wheels or an armored insect to me.
Armored insect is fine. I would say they probably want you to say it looks like a fighter jet, an alien spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely looks aerodynamic, but I wouldn't say it's subtle in any way.
Not subtle, no. Like driving this for a whole week at Car Week sounds kind of insane. I think I would have shipped two cars if I was this person. Because I believe this car maybe had an asking price, I want to say around $3 million. So if you can afford that, you probably have some other cars.
Yeah.
Maybe ship
The
the
whole
Range
fleet.
Rover to cruise when you get tired of this thing drawing attention.
And which Ferraris is based on?
It's not, I don't think the chassis is shared with anything, but I think the engine is Ferrari's standard, I believe it's 6.3 liter V12.
Okay, so it's
I believe it's amped up and
not
tuned in their own
it's
way.
not like a special coach-built car coach-built Ferrari after the fact.
Yeah, it's closer.
It's not a rebody. This is they use some Ferrari engine.
Right. It's like Pagani, how Pagani uses the Mercedes V12.
You know, like even though I called it ugly, I do understand what's going on, and there's just too much going on.
Yeah, I don't know if that might just be this photo too, but it looks awesome in person, especially because it's kind of hard to tell in this photo, but it's actually kind of color shifting. There's times where it looks more red and times where it looks more orange and yellow.
You know, it's definitely not my taste, but as complicated as it looks, there is a sort of purity to this because
It's not practical.
because it makes me think of, you know, I'm definitely not a visual artist, but this makes me think of what so many little kids draw when they're drawing like a car. And of course, little kids, when they draw cars, they're not drawing like this is a practical 3-box sedan. You know, they draw these extreme looking cars. And I don't mean to say, the designers aren't talented or anything, but you know, when you're a little kid and you fantasize about this super exotic, expensive, fast car, a lot of them, I guarantee you, have lines like this. You know, very swoopy, very dramatic.
In like a Hot Wheel.
So what you're saying is this car was designed by a 4-year-old.
Not necessarily, but there is that purity to it.
Sure. Yeah, it is in essence as crazy as it could possibly be. You're not going to look at this and go, wonder if he gets groceries with that thing.
Yeah. That again?
Yeah. Like I said, the car took attention away from Pagani's and Bugattis and an SLR McLaren and a gated Mercy. Those are all cars that genuinely people would get excited about to see, and especially gated Mercies are fairly rare. You know, SLRs are cars you don't see very often, despite the fact that they built a good chunk of them, but very cool cars. So we started walking around and happened to unintentionally stumble into a Ferrari mini show that happened to be on this like Italian avenue with a lot of Italian restaurants in Carmel. And one of the cars that I immediately drew my attention, obviously all vintage Ferraris are great Ferraris in my opinion, even the ones that may be questionably reliable, I would still love. There was a 288 GTO. That is a car that I have seen like poor replicas of, even for Fiero replicas of, but I've never seen a real one. And so to see one in person got me excited. I am a person that's a huge fan of like especially Group B rally cars. And obviously the 288 GTO was kind of being groomed to run in some of that and even the Group 5 racing. And then for those of you that don't know but are familiar with the F40, the engine was taken from the 288 GTO extreme race car version that they were kind of working on developing and then was put into the F40. So all of that kind of started from this car, which kind of started that grooming process for Ferrari building their next high-end race cars for Group 5 racing.
Yeah, and I've always known this to be like what many regard as the first Ferrari like halo car, because after this was F40, F50, Enzo, and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that sense.
Except that it looks too much like a 308.
Yeah, but if you're familiar with the 308, you know that this is dramatically more extreme than the 308. The 308 has much more like subdued fenders. It's not as wide. It doesn't have the kick up in the back in the same way. The fog lights up front are fairly notable for this car. There's quite a bit details that vary it. That being said, I know that there is such a thing in the Ferrari world where people would do 308 to 288 body conversions. Which sounds crazy to me, but you have to remember that the value for a 308 is like 40-ish grand to start. I think it's kind of entry level for like a driver. So
whereas these are probably
millions,
6 figures. Yeah.
Yeah. They're expensive.
As a child of the 80s, I remember when these came out, but I'd still take a Lamborghini. Also, these came out around the same time as the Testarossa.
You would take a Lamborghini over this? I know that this is a V8, not a V12, but I mean, Lamborghini has been using
twin turbo.
Yes.
Okay. No, I mean the Lamborghini is just something that just seems more of an ultimate sports car than this.
Wow. See, my issue with Lamborghini is knowing like the Countach is great, but knowing that like Lamborghini's really just kicking a dead horse by using that same V12 all the way up to the Mercy. is crazy.
From a mechanical point of view, sure. But from a styling point of view, this is just milquetoast in comparison to the Countach.
I think you only say that because, as you mentioned, the appearance similarities to the 308. It is definitely in the same design.
And there's nothing wrong with the 308. I mean, like, in some ways, that's the quintessential Ferrari to me.
It's a good-looking car. Obviously, it made famous by Magnum PI.
I mean, also made famous by when you visit LA. That's the one you see.
Yeah, true.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with this. It just seemed kind of tepid in comparison.
Well, since you mentioned that, I forgot to include a photo of it. There is the Cannonball Countach was at Pebble on Sunday, so that was cool. No, it's still got the front. Well, it's different in the sense that it's got like some really tacky period modifications, but it actually has the nose spoiler. So it had the nose spoiler, and then if you're familiar with the Cannonball movie, it's also got like, I don't remember if it's 8 or like 12 exhaust pipes in the back.
Was it white?
No, it's black.
Not black? Okay. I just remember it wasn't red.
Was that the one? I think there's a movie Countach with the hella lights on it. Did that have hella lights, or am I thinking of something else?
It might. I don't remember off the top of my head. Like I said, I should have included the photo, but I kind of spaced that car. This is a random photo of a Singer from Singer, I believe. Singer Reimagined 911. These were everywhere. Most of what we saw was classics, but it was like they were parked everywhere. And so here's what I got to say. So these cars are expensive, well beyond my budget. They start around like $400,000 for a classic, and they work their way up from there. They're beautiful. I love Singers. I think I've mentioned them multiple times in various episodes through the podcast.
No, you haven't.
Right. But what made me so excited was seeing them like on the road. Like I didn't really see any like entered into car shows, but the fact that they were all driven there or at least there to be used as cars during Car Week made me super excited because that means all these cars were getting used. Right. And so I was excited to see that we'd see them parked at hotels. You'd see them street parked. You'd see them outside of like every event. I think there was a few getting sold in various extents at places too that people were trying. Like it was funny. You'd see street park cars with for sale signs at them occasionally, which obviously like where else do you sell a car than Car Week, right? But it was cool seeing a bunch of these. But then as we were driving back to San Jose to fly home, we got passed by a DLS, which is the pinnacle so far as Singer cars go. Obviously they're coming out with new turbo models, but the DLS is like a $2 million Singer. And so to get passed by one of those was a good icing on the cake after seeing like, I want to say 7 or 8. I have some killer photos of one parked at an In-N-Out, which I thought was great. So just to see them driven, see them taken to In-N-Out was an awesome experience. They were everywhere, almost like a good way to catalog the trip. Like, oh, have we seen that Singer? Oh, I think we're up to 8 or 9 Singers now. Just all the different various catalog versions that exist. So very cool.
What's a DLS?
So DLS is the version that they did with Williams Engineering. So Williams F1 Engineering developed a special motor along with other suspension bits, all that for the Singer. And it also came with a variety of cosmetic improvements. It features basically a full carbon fiber body with the exception of the door. So they even do the roof. And so they cut up the 963 that they use, put it in full carbon, and it has all sorts of different turn signals and other aero bits that are added onto it. And it even uses center axle nuts for the wheels. So it is the full extreme track focused version, so to speak. And hence why it's $2 million as opposed to the $400,000 starting price of a classic. So tons of those. So this is a photo from, I'm surprised we're not in it. This is a photo from Exotics on Broadway. And the reason I'm showing you this is I want to point out how many people are there. So at first we show up. We were walking around for a good 15 minutes going, yeah, there's some cool stuff here. It seems kind of busy, but it only got busier. By the time we were going to leave, this is what you experienced, by the way, all these Koenigsegg's which came in, which was amazing to see, including Christian von Koenigsegg driving the new CC8S himself, which was awesome. Then there was a stream of Paganis that came in with Horatio leading the pack as well. And then that was followed by a pack of Hennessy Venom F5s. And it was insane to see all these cars in one place, especially showing up in convoys like this. This is the Koenigsegg convoy, and you can see we have Pagani behind it. But it was insane to see all those cars showing up in packs, including Aston Martin Valkyries, McLaren Senna GTRs, like insane cars that were showing up to this event. But by the time we were leaving, you were literally shoulder to shoulder with everybody. So not a great place to make content. We tried to film some stuff, but it is a very hard area to film in.
Oh, yeah.
But very cool to see all those cars show up in that environment nonetheless.
Now, I got to ask you, Jeff, after seeing all of these day in, day out, did you reach a point where you were desensitized? I'm
jaded. And anything less than a Koenigsegg is just a poor person's car. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So here, this is the CC8S and Christian von Koenigsegg. So just like I mentioned, he was driving this car with the top off. So that was pretty cool. That was a life-changing experience for me as someone that's a huge Christian von Koenigsegg fan, just for the passion he puts into the cars. And here's Horatio and the Pagani, which obviously there were tons of various versions of the Paganis as well. But very cool to see them at Car Week. Obviously, parading their own cars is a very cool touch as well. So I wanted to move on to some of the other events. Pebble Beach. So I want to give a shout out to Mercedes. So a lot of the manufacturers have their own houses at Car Week. They're usually very limiting. The amount of I've never seen so many security guards to stop you from looking at cars or going into car buildings, right? So they rent out these houses or have certain displays. Most of the manufacturers were really limiting and like not wanting you into certain spaces or even let you look at some of the cars they had on display unless you had like a pre-approved appointment and that type of stuff. But Mercedes was one of the more generous ones. So they had some newer models that people were allowed to sit in and take photos with, but then they also had some of their concept cars on display. And this C111 concept was also there. They had the doors open, no ropes. So that was very cool. They also had their Mondo G, which is a G-Wagon collaboration with Montclair. It looks like a puffy jacket G-Wagon. That was also there with no ropes. And then they also had some Mercedes classic vehicles. So there was an Alloy 300 SL along with a, I believe there were 3 S600. Some versions were the Landaulet version, and they had those all on display as well. So a cool collection. Mercedes was one of the more generous manufacturers as far as how cool their house was. They also had, aside from Maybach. And then they even had some other vehicles kind of scattered throughout. And I think they even giving out free drinks. So very generous on that side as opposed to a lot of other manufacturers, which wouldn't even let you in. Which, in my opinion, if you're going to bring a bunch of cool cars to display, like if you have your own diner section or cool hangout section that you don't want people into, fine. But the car should at least be easy to get access to and take photos of, especially at an event like Pebble Beach where you're paying $575 for a ticket.
Well, also there's media there. I mean,
right.
It can only benefit them in that way.
Yeah, media is not buying an Aston Martin Valkyrie for $2 million to test it out. So might as well be a little bit more generous for what you're able to do. Like, don't you think you'd want more photos and videos of your cars out there, right?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah, that's odd.
Yeah, I thought so. All right. This is a Ferrari 250 GTO, of which there were 2 of in Monterey. I believe this used to be one of the most expensive cars on the planet. I believe the last public sale was around $62 million, give or take. From what I understand, there was one that sold privately, supposedly, for around $70 million. But there were 2 of them here in Monterey. There was one at another event, and then there was one at Pebble Beach in Casa Ferrari. With no ropes around it. And that was a surreal moment for me. This is one of my favorite Ferraris of all time. I just think it's also one of the most beautiful cars of all time. And obviously they have the super tiny displacement 3-liter V12, and they're beautiful cars.
I want to say, I don't know if he still owns it, but I read a few years ago that the guy who started WeatherTech has one of these.
Yes, and he took it on a rally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, very, very cool of him to do, to take one of these cars. He drove it through the, what do they call it? The Concours d'Elegance Drive, I believe. He kind of took it through, might have even taken it on a rally.
Gutsy.
Yeah, very cool thing to do. I mean, if you've got the money from selling floor mats, maybe he just wrapped it in rubber WeatherTech floor mats. Those are pretty thick and durable. That'll protect it for sure from rock chips.
Yeah, and spilled sodas.
Yeah, ruin some of the body lines maybe by wrapping it in those mats, but it'll protect it for sure.
You know, I would take the white Ferrari I showed you a few minutes earlier over this.
What? That's okay. You can be wrong.
I,
Just remember, the internet's forever.
it feels very right.
Yeah, I mean, that's your personal preference. I love these cars. I've always loved it since I was a kid and got like a Hot Wheel of it, which is an old Hot Wheel at this point because Ferrari, I don't think, has really done a whole lot with Hot Wheels since. Because from what I understand, they're limited in that sense for certain models. But
Well, I know for a while, maybe it's changed. I know they were doing the 1/18th scale with Hot Wheels, but I don't know, about 1/64th scale.
yeah, it's been a minute, I think. But it was cool to see two of those in person. I've never seen a real one. All the cars that I've seen were poor kit cars, or I think I've even seen one that was based off a 240Z.
So if you saw two of them, did it look like this? Was it the same coach builder, the same design?
Oh, yeah. No, the bodies were the exact same. I'm not sure how many of them there are. There can't be that many, I would think. But yeah, they were both equipped in like I think they're race liveries. I think both of them are numbered. So they were both supposed to be real race cars, which is awesome. I think they were, as GTOs, I think they were race cars, maybe all of them that were produced.
And they had the blue seats, because that was,
Yes,
they
blue
made
seats.
those out of the overalls, I think.
That I don't know.
Something
you sound
like
like you know more about that than I do.
Yeah, it's something like it's made out of overalls or blue jeans, the blue seating fabric.
Why did they do that? Was that like a symbolism thing?
Maybe, yeah. I don't know the backstory behind that, but I bought a model of that, not the race car version, but like the street car version years ago. And I guess at the time I was reading a little bit more about it, so it's a weird kind of quirk about them.
Fair enough. So moving on to more Casa Ferrari stuff. So that was probably one of my favorite displays at Pebble Beach was the Casa Ferrari stuff because there had to be at least 100 Ferraris. And they had a little bit of everything. At kind of heading off the display, they had the Pro Songway off to the side. And then they also had this. They had the SF90XX, both in Stradale form and Spider form, which is it actually might be the newest Ferrari that's come out. So this is one of the interesting parts is this is an XX car, but it doesn't have it is street legal as opposed to the previous XX cars, which are track only, not street legal cars, which they also had one of each. So they had the 599XX, they had the FXK, the FXX, all that. They had every single one of those on display, not to mention NART cars, 250 Testarossas, 250 Californias. They had like basically every car you could possibly imagine, Ferrari-wise. They had like one of everything. 599 Aperta SA. They had multiple Competiciones of the 812. They had, Enzos, F40s, F50s, F40 GTLM with the different spoiler and different headlights and stuff. It was truly impressive.
Jeff, what about the good stuff? Did they have a Mondial there?
Right. I believe they did actually, but they also had the cool stuff that they built a lot of. So there were like 430 like Scuderias, but then they also had the 430 like 16M.
Oh, yeah.
Which was limited to like 499 or something like that. So tons of cool cars. And as someone as a kid, I was a huge Ferrari obsessive person. So that was like full circle just to see the sheer number of Ferraris that they had there. And then the fact that they're not roped off, which granted, it's not a cheap event to get into. You have to be committed to get into Pebble Beach, but very cool event to attend to get to see those cars and a lot of race cars as well that were in there. Mm-hmm. So this is what Pebble Beach looked like. This is the display. They had like a McLaren Focus this year. And one of the things that stood out to me is obviously they had a lot of cool McLaren race cars that you could find in a lot of museums, but they also had all three of the McLaren F1s. So they had the regular F1, they had the F1 GTLM, and then they had the F1 GTR. Yeah. So that was pretty impressive. They had these two Miras, this SV that's in white and gold, one of the less exciting colors for an SV. But then they had the green one, what is sort of like Ithaca Verde of a standard Lamborghini in the background as well. There was tons of cool stuff. There was a Cobra, there was a Ford GT, Maserati 200S. It's amazing the stuff that they had there. They had a Grand Sport. Lots of really, really cool cars. Obviously, some of the cool parts about Pebble Beach is there's also this concourse judging part that happens, which may or may not be your thing. But there's also some of these cars are driving to and from the presentations. And so you have like 1920s Duesenbergers driving by after they're done getting judged. And it's almost the way people dress up. Some people almost dress to character, so to speak. So you have people wearing like vintage clothing and hats, but then everyone's like smoking cigars at the same time while you're out driving some of these cars. So it really is like this visceral, awesome experience. Not to mention that, as you can kind of see there, you're basically on a cliff with the ocean behind you, and there's multiple yachts just hanging out off the shore. It's pretty awesome.
What's this custom bodied Lamborghini, the white one?
That one I don't remember. I can tell you that this one that's right in front of us is a this what is it, 400 GT, 350 GT. Yeah, 350 GT.
I love those seats.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's the Grand Touring Ferrari or Lamborghini, right? The first Lamborghini / Grand Touring Lamborghini, 350 GT. Yeah, I don't remember what that white one was. Unfortunately, there was so much stuff. Like one of the other things that was crazy to me was the amount of stuff that I didn't know. Like, you know, you get comfortable with certain cars and you see some of those cars more often, but then like you go to an event like this and you're like, wow, what is this? This is the one-off coach built version of that. And other custom cars that were built in period by people that like you've never heard of, but like maybe showed up in a magazine because it was found in somebody's barn last week and now it's here at Pebble Beach. But then you also get the other side of it where you get finished restorations. So one of my favorite cars that was there was a Porsche 906 that had a really unique livery, but was repainted when it was sold to somebody that was using it as a street car. Because as often happened with a lot of race cars, when nobody cared at the time to think of them as collectible, they would get sold, not cheaply, but they would get sold for significantly less than we would think they'd be sold for. And then people would maybe repaint them out of their racing liveries in a car that they just wanted to drive it in as a street car, right? This car was recently refurbished. It's got a cool yellow and black, like almost, I would say, like honeybee stripe to it. It's kind of chevron angled down the car, and that car was unveiled. And I believe that was recently restored after it was in a singular color, not being represented as its racing livery for a while. So lots of cool stuff like that. I think it might have been restored by Road Scholars, maybe. But very cool car. Tons of stuff like that. There's a constant case of like, oh wow, look at that. Oh wow, look at that. Oh wow, look at that. So it's pretty hard to look at the cars once you stop hyperventilating, but pretty interesting.
What's really cool about this, I mean, I haven't been to the event, but just the way you're describing it and the way the logistics work is, if you go to an automotive museum, that's great too, because they're documenting history, they're preserving it. But here, the cars are being driven. You see them in motion, you hear them, you know, they're being, to a certain extent, lived in, you know, but they're also displayed, you know, in static state as you would see them in a museum. So it's the best of both worlds. You know, they're being used and driven. And, you know, it's one of those things like, yes, it's up to the owner. I mean, they can do whatever they want with it, but there's something about it it's nice to know that these beautiful, rare, exotic cars are actually being driven. Yeah,
and you know, a lot of the families too really seem to get behind on some of the concourse stuff that happens. So like some of the Duesenberg and stuff, like those are massive vehicles if you've never seen one in person. And some of the people would have like full families and even extended families climb into the vehicle. So you'd see these, you know, Duesenbergs cruising up towards the stage with like 8 people in them.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was awesome to see that type of stuff. And then unfortunately, some cars always don't fare so well. There was a larger Fiat, which had a little bit of a mishap, started leaking some oil in a very dramatic sense as it was coming back, and then shut off. And then you got these guys trying to hand crank it back to get it going again, which was not something you see every day, right? You don't show up to car shows and watch people hand crank their cars to get them moving again. But very cool stuff, especially seeing some of these 60s race cars that I had mentioned. You know, when those fire up, those are significantly louder than some of the Duesenbergs. They're surprisingly quiet for a time where nobody cared about exhausts or emissions and things like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious, the person they're going to have repair the Fiat, is his name Tony?
Yeah. They just take it over to the Fiat house. There was no Fiat house, but they would have. All right. With that, that's kind of our highlight there. My only regret is not having more versions of myself to attend all the various events that happen, because there's literally multiple events happening every day that are happening the same time as other events. So you have to make choices. You have to be decisive on which you go to. But our coverage will be coming up on YouTube. So if you're interested in watching that, make sure you get subscribed to the AutoHunter and ClassicCars.com YouTube channel. With that, let's get into some of the cars that are currently live on AutoHunter.com.
So this was my choice.
It's my choice, and you took it.
Oh, well, I didn't know. It was unclaimed at that time. This is a 1998 Jaguar XJR. Just love this generation of it. It's low. It's very feline, slinky, sleek. Great color. I think this was what was throwing me off earlier. Because this is Carnival Red over oatmeal leather. And so that R means that it's the performance version of the XJ. At this point in time, it was a supercharged 4-liter V8, 370 horsepower, 387 pound-feet of torque. Healthy numbers, especially for 25 years ago. And then you got the mesh inserts in the grille, the leaper hood ornament up there, those cool 18-inch wheels, and those are wrapped in Pirelli tires. And then this has had some, service and some updates over the years. So the engine mounts were replaced in 2020. Drive belts were replaced the year before. And it had the valve cover gaskets and fluids changed in 2021.
I didn't realize that these were supercharged 4-liters for the XJR. I just assumed that all of the R versions had the 4.2.
No, those came later.
Right, because the XKR was only available with the 4.2 for the R, right?
No, I think those had the 4-liter too.
Did they?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, pretty. And then of course the wood grain interior on the inside, and then
Jaguar.
Yeah, and then the J-gate shifter, which of course in recent years transitioned to the dial. But cool kind of older school Jaguar design cue there.
Yeah, the XJ to me is the ultimate bad guy Jag, because as you mentioned, it's like it's got this just low slung aggressive sedan to do bad guy work in.
Yeah, and the model that came after this had more or less the same lines, but those were puffier, chunkier.
Are you talking about the X-Type?
No, like the XJ that came after this. It looked very similar.
It doesn't stand a chance.
Yeah, they're just, and don't get me wrong, those are good looking cars, but they're just not as lean and as sleek as this one.
And what year is this?
This is a 98.
Yeah, I consider a lot of the 90s and early 2000s Jags to be kind of in a golden era of Jaguar ownership. I think some of the cars that came later into the 2010s and stuff just didn't quite have the same flair.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, especially the successor to this. Now, the last generation XJ, I still don't like it as much as this, but they went for a very dramatic, swoopy look to those, and they tried something different. Mm-hmm. But this is just such a modern classic, because this looked like its predecessors, but refined it and gave it a musculature that I think this is like peak XJ.
Yeah, I could agree with that.
You don't think the original is peak XJ?
No, I mean, the older ones look good, but I've always loved these. I think these are just
Is this
perfect.
the same generation as the one that came out like in 87, but facelifted?
No.
Or it's a new generation?
Yeah,
New generation, similar styling.
yeah, because
No, the one in 87 didn't have the same. That was the first one that was the redesign after the one from 68. So they got rid of let's say these.
Because you're talking about the ones that were inline 6-powered, right?
They had 12s also, but like the ones that they had the European flush headlights, but they also had the quads, depending on the market and maybe the model.
I was going to say, I thought the U.S. market might have been quads only.
I think initially it was quads only, but they may have had flush headlights later.
yeah, I remember XJs with the rectangular headlights.
So, but this is a different generation. This is one after.
Yeah, I want to say
And
this
the facelifted
generation.
version.
I want to say this generation started maybe mid '90s,
I think that's right.
something like that.
You know, my dad used to have a problem with these cars. He always wanted a Jaguar. He couldn't afford it. I guess now he can because he has one,
Yep.
at least a newer one. the foot room with the transmission, like in the driver's seat, it was very uncomfortable. His leg was always banging on the console.
Oh, okay.
If you, next time you see one, look inside. You'll see it's pretty small.
But it's an automatic, so you don't need room for both legs.
You can see it's.
You can drive it with one leg.
So would his feet have to be, or his legs have to be angled in a weird way for the pedals? Or
I don't know, but it looks like you have no other choice except to press your leg against it.
Yeah, that's news to me. I've never driven one of these. I'd love to, but
That makes two of us.
to know. Yeah.
I think the best part about these is you get the V8 growl. So while it's just sitting there idling, you get the blah, 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 blah. And so that's what adds to
Can you
it.
do that again, please?
No. One is all you get. One per episode.
Bummer. Okay, so this was my choice. Honestly, I don't remember if this is a 65 or 66. This is probably a 65.
Sacrilege.
Yeah, I know. I mean, from the side gills, it could be a 65 or 66. Clearly, it's not a 67. If there's another way to tell, I don't know what it is, but I bet this is a 65 because in my mind, I want to say this is the first year of the L79, which this is one. So that's a 327, 350 horse. 65 was the last year for fuel injection, so this was the step down from that, I believe, in 65. I don't think they had the L76 in 65, which would have been the 365 horse one. But the L79 is I've never driven one, but has a great reputation as being probably the best all-around 327 of the era. It was also available in Chevelles and Novas, depending on the year. I guess I should say Chevy 2s. So it's a popular engine. It's not the mightiest of small blocks, but it's the one that has it's the compromise one that's got all the power, but is easy to drive. Grumpy Jenkins had a big success beating Hemis with this in a Chevy 2. And it's kind of hard to beat a C2 Vet.
Especially in that color, yeah.
They're good.
Although with this color, I'd love to have a tan interior.
Yeah, I get that.
But it's a nice car.
I don't have a photo of the
Presentation's good.
seats in here, but are the seats black or white?
These seats are black.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because of that dash cover on the passenger side is white in the center of the black. So I didn't know if there was some cool two-tone thing going on.
I didn't know until, I'm far from a Corvette expert, but I wrote Pick of the Day maybe a week or two ago, and I was surprised they had some two-tone combinations. They had some silver, it was like black and silver maybe, I can't really remember, but I just remember it had silver door panels, and it looked really good.
Yeah, I'm not sure, thinking in the memory banks here, I'm not sure I've seen too many C2 Corvettes with two-tone interiors.
Yeah, I can see that being more of an aftermarket thing,
Right. Well, cool. And that one's up for sale. There were actually quite a few different C2s that were available. I mentioned the Grand Sport that we saw, but then also there was a, what was it, L88 race car? I think it was supposed to be a track car that we saw that was run through somewhere in there.
It's a C2.
Yeah.
A real 88s, I think they built 20 of them.
Well, then this was one of 20. It was supposedly used, and it was one of the earlier cars, I guess, used to demonstrate basically as like durability testing for the motor. And it was raced by Gary
Bondurant.
No, it starts with a G. His last name's Gary Gove. Something like that.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't Gary Glitter.
Who apparently I'll give you the short story here because I thought it was kind of interesting. It's also going to be in the YouTube video, but the short part is Gary was apparently bought a Lotus to go racing, and then this Chevrolet dealership knocked on his door and said, "Hey, check out this cool L88 Corvette we have that we'd like to take racing. Would like you to drive it." Took it for a drive supposedly, and the story goes he sold the Lotus. Immediately sold the Lotus and then said, "Yep, I'll take that," and then drove the car in a series.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was
an endorsement.
Yeah. To go and sell your Lotus race car that you were preparing for upcoming season. Go, nope, I'd rather drive the Corvette. Thank you very much. So that's pretty cool. I mean, the Corvette was considered serious competition. I know that Shelby, I think, often was concerned about this car in particular. Not the 327, 350, but the C2 Corvette was his main target. Is like, what does the Cobra have to be faster than? So props to those Corvettes. So this is my pick, mostly because I'm inspired by old cars after spending a lot of time with them. And like I said, a lot of particularly old cars. This is a 1936 Ford model 68 three-window coupe. And one of the things I liked about it is I think just the simplicity of it. So this car featured a frame-off restoration. It's powered by a 221 cubic inch flathead V8. Then, of course, it's got a 3-speed manual transmission. So nothing crazy to it. It's finished in Washington blue over a tan interior. I thought it was just a nice color, nice all-around build, obviously with this sort of pseudo-continental package for the spare on the rear. Just kind of a neat car that I think you would be able to drive around and enjoy in Monterey.
I just cringed when you said Continental.
Why is that?
I mean, like, you know, back in the day, they had side mounts.
Sure.
Or they had this just because there wasn't much room. I mean, this car doesn't have a trunk.
Right. But to me, whenever I see it, that's just the first thing that comes to mind, particularly the massive Thunderbirds, the later Thunderbirds. But
and you know, the only reason they call it a Continental kit is because the 1940 Continental had it.
Sure. But here it is in its glory. I think it's a beautiful car. And just something a little unique that you would be able to take to Pebble Beach. The variety of cars that we saw, there were people driving around in convertible muscle cars. I was very jealous. We had a Malibu as a rental car. That was actually, I would say, almost like a similar shade of blue to this. It was kind of a fun, the color was fun. Can't say I enjoyed the car so much, but really wish we had a convertible, because that would have been a ton of fun. Obviously, it's hard to control that flying in on Thursday, but I can understand, like, the amount of people that were doing it right. I was very jealous of. You'd watch people, like, I saw convertibles packed with people. Like, I even saw some Ford Falcons that had people in the back seats and stuff, and like there were just people getting crammed into some of these cars and cruising to some of the other events, and I was very, very jealous.
Yeah, just make it work.
Yeah. But what a cool event in total. All of these cars that we just highlighted are actually currently live on AutoHunter.com. So if you're interested in bidding on them or any of the other cars that are currently live, there's certainly way more than this, as cars are going live every single weekday. So if you're interested in buying or selling your next collector car, be sure to check out AutoHunter.com, or, as I mentioned earlier, the sister site, ClassicCars.com, which is an online marketplace which has over 30,000 cars currently live on the site. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can hit the like button for us. We'd really appreciate it. Consider getting subscribed for future episodes, and of course, comment down below, let us know what you think, or if you've ever been to Car Week or what you thought. Go ahead and let us know down below. And of course, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you guys next time.
See y'all.